Hi guys, so today's video is going to be a list of a bunch of things that all of you are tired of hearing based off of the fact that you are a bookworm, things that you just can't stand people saying to you. So this came about because I did a video where I was reacting to a list of the top 10 things that bookworms are tired of hearing. I don't know if this list was computer generated or its responses were computer generated or if they just polled some really entertaining, fun people, but that was interesting. When doing that video, I asked all of you, what are things that you actually can't stand hearing? Because pretty much none of the things from that list, I don't feel like most of us care about any of those things. You submitted so many things that annoy you that I actually have to break this up into 2 videos. Apparently, we are sensitive Sallys because we're annoyed at everything. The first one is one that I personally don't get that upset over, but I absolutely can see why other people get annoyed at this, and that is the I wish I had the time to read statement. This one is just implying that anybody who has time to read must have tons and tons of free time, when in actuality, most of the time, people, they have to sacrifice doing other things, spending time with other people, watching TV shows, being in the know when it comes to what's popular. And a lot of people are really busy. They listen to audiobooks in the car, they listen to audiobooks when they're getting ready. They carve out time to read on their lunch breaks. They find the time to read. It's not like there's just endless hours to pick up a book. These are in no particular order, but the next one that came up was that a book shouldn't be read because the author is problematic or the book itself is problematic. I'm not doing air quotes to make light of that situation, just air quotes because it depends on who you are and your views on that. I'm actually not going to go super in depth with this. Kind of became a popular topic as of late, and funny enough, one of my things that I wanted to do this year was more in-depth conversations about kind of controversial topics. I had this written in my calendar, basically this very topic of separating art from artists, and then Book Twitter decided it wanted to have that conversation anyway, and then that went back to YouTube and everybody's talking about it, and I still have so many other things that I personally feel like are important parts of that conversation. But either way, I have seen some people say that it is very frustrating when somebody tells you what you should or shouldn't read or tries to shame you for what you are reading because of the actions of the author or because they personally were frustrated at certain elements of the book. I'm very curious your thoughts on this one. I have a feeling a lot of you have your own opinions with this. The next one is one that I can't believe is still even a thing. I thought we were all like, oh yeah, that's dumb. Who still thinks that? But the audiobooks don't count thing. So if somebody is literally saying listening to an audiobook is not reading, physically reading, obviously, duh. But if you're saying it doesn't count, that you shouldn't count it towards your books read for the year, or that you shouldn't do a review or something, I don't understand how that makes any sense. You're still consuming the exact same story. The exact same story. It's not like I watched a movie and I was like, I've read the book now. That's clearly not the same thing. It's an adaptation, so it is different. But if you are listening to an audiobook and it's not abridged, you have consumed the exact same story as someone else. That'd be like saying if somebody read an ebook because it's a different form, that's not the same as reading a physical book. Also, there are some individuals who have visual issues. They have something that makes it so they can't really read easily, and so they listen to audiobooks. And who is saying to that person, like, okay, well, you might have vision problems, but that means that you aren't reading ever. What person would do that? I don't know. I totally get why this is annoying, but I also, is this still a thing? Is this still a thing that people are like, oh, if you listen to audiobooks, you're not reading? I haven't seen that come up, but if people are still telling you that, I'm sorry for you, that stinks. Next up, you all hit on some very juicy ones that entire videos could be dedicated towards. The next one is spending habits. Any kind of conversation or comment revolving around, why did you buy that book? Why do you need another copy? Why don't you have many books? Why are you always going to the library? You know that doesn't actually help the author. All of that stuff, anything to do with how somebody spends their money surrounding books. While I do understand a conversation being had about the consumerism with people online who are making videos about books, I understand there being a conversation around it, But that said, if you are somebody who is not making videos about books, I don't know why it is anyone's business what you're spending your money on, unless you are in debt and you have children and you have people who rely on you and you're like, you don't need to eat today because mommy wants this book. Maybe that would be a problem, but I don't think that's usually what's happening. Usually it's somebody who, they're grown people. They can spend their money how they want. They want that book over there, even though they have 2 other editions of it, because that's what they want. And somebody being like, do you really need that? I will never understand that attitude, because at the end of the day, let's be real, most of us have a lot of things that we don't actually need. This next one is one that I haven't seen a ton, probably because of what it's referring to. It's a little more specific, and it's not exactly something that I consume very much. And it would be that if you read romance books, that means you are reading some form of erotica. So I'm very curious if you are somebody who does really enjoy romance books, if this is something that comes up a lot and if this is really frustrating for you. And I don't know. I don't really read romance books. If anything, it's just fantasy that sometimes has romance. And then it's a conversation of how much romance does this fantasy book need? Or is this fantasy book's romance any good? Probably not. Another one that came up that I thought was really interesting is that if you like to read, that means you are a very studious person. And that this is frustrating because essentially you are being cast into a certain mold. You must be this way if you like to read. And I think that's interesting as well. I wouldn't say that that is too much a thing for me, because I am kind of that stereotype. But at the same time, I do know what it's like to be a fan of something and have people be really surprised somewhere else. Or, for example, this is not so much a thing with reading in general, but with fantasy. I started off my channel talking a lot about Witcher. I feel like I was one of the only people talking about Witcher, the Witcher books, when I first started my channel. And I got so many comments of people telling me that I was faking it because I'm a girl and girls don't like Witcher. And I'm like, okay, I don't know why. I don't know why me being a lady somehow means that I'm incapable of enjoying this story. But either way, that concept of you are a certain way, so then you must also be this way. I'm curious, beyond just the example I gave and the thing that was commented on from the video, what is an example of a time that because you like to read, somebody just made an assumption about you and what you like or what you don't like elsewhere? This next one is one of my favorites because it absolutely defines my husband, and that is that if you are reading, that's an invitation for people to come talk to you. People coming up and be like, what's that book about? Oh, what are you reading? Usually if somebody has their book out, they don't want to interact. They want to read their book. That's usually what's going on. That's very true of my husband, sweet man that he is. He is kind of shy and he just kind of wants to keep to himself. So if he goes somewhere and he has his book open and somebody comes up to him, they're like, hey, so I was wondering, he's just like, why? Why me? So I feel like this one especially amuses me because it makes me think of him. I will admit I don't ever want people to come up and talk to me because I have a little bit of, not anything extreme, but some social anxiety. So I'm just like, please no one see me or talk to me. Masks are my best friend because I'm like, oh yes, more of my face can be covered. I just love the idea that I'm less inviting when it comes to like, oh yeah, sure, just come talk to me, please. I'm going to lump the last two together because they touch on basically the same thing, which would be age range snobbery and genre snobbery. So anyone who decides that you're not reading real books because you're reading young adult, or when you're going to grow up and read books that are not middle grade or are not young adults. So that's the age range snobbery. But then take that to the next level, because there are people who are like, yeah, adult fantasy is so superior. And then there are other people that are like, you're reading fantasy when you're going to read real books. And then there are people who are reading fiction, and there are nonfiction people who are like, why don't you read something that's actually practical and helpful and inform yourself? Just, it goes on and on and on and on. And I don't get it. I don't get it, because I'm like, how unhappy do you have to be to care that much about what other people are reading? I don't get it. Unless you're reading something with the intention of being like, I'm going to take what I'm reading in this book and then try to determine how I can slaughter a bunch of people. Like if you're reading a grimdark book and you're like, yes, this is what I want for the world, maybe I'm a little concerned, but that's not really something I'm concerned about for the most part. I would say not at all. I don't get it. I don't get it. And I do understand if something's not for you. That's totally different. If somebody likes reading nonfiction and fiction is just not their thing, I don't care. Who cares, right? It falls along the same thing. I don't care what you like for yourself. I don't care if you're like, oh yeah, most of the time, I don't know. I'm just like, that's not my thing. Fine. No big deal. But it's the superiority. Anything that borders on being pretentious, I can't stand it. So those were 10 things that all of you mentioned. And like I said, there are quite a few more, so I will be doing a part 2 to this. Feel free to elaborate on some of the things that came up. Let me know your thoughts, especially like I said, on some of the juicier tea type of submissions, but then also let me know if there are some that bother you that weren't on this list. It'll be interesting to see if some of those pop up on part 2. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll see you all later. Bye.